This discourse excited a great deal of agitation in the council. The public galleries applauded, notwithstanding the rules, and were called to order. They ordered an impression of the discourse. The reporter, Malice, felt very sensibly so direct an attack. "I will undertake beforehand," he cried, "the engagement to pulverize to prove that Lucien Bonaparte, against his intentions, without doubt, has committed capital errors. I demand for the discussion to continue." The discussion was adjourned to the next day. We did not doubt the result. The directorials, exasperated, were disconcerted. The opposition from that day took a character of violence that it had not had before. The next day, the deputy, Croiset-Latouche, in a very eloquent discourse, defended the tax and the commissions of the finances. He raised the hopes of the partisans of the tax as he talked on my pretended errors in calculation. I had printed the same day in the Moniteur the following note: "The citizen Croiset-Latouche has affirmed in his discourse of the 14th that I had committed an error in calculation. I think it right to deny that assertion, as it is absolutely false. I said that the deficit did not appear to me to be 50 millions because upon the 24th of Vendémiaire, the citizen Distrem, in the name of the commission, having brought the deficit to 55 millions and the tax upon the windows being valued at 16 millions by the citizen Malice himself, if evidently results that the deficit cannot be 55 but less by 16, that it is to say 39 millions, except the commissioner formally disavows his report of the 24th Vendémiaire, a disavowal which, not having been made, cannot serve to form the opinions of the representatives of the people. This, then, is what I said, and from whence I conclude that the deficit was not so great as the reporter told us, but neither he nor any other person has replied to the inquiry. I never pretended that the taxes proposed by the citizen Destrem would have supplied the deficit, because I knew very well that some had been rejected and the others reduced. I have then only calculated the taxes of the citizen Destrem for 16 millions. I have heard that that sum was to diminish so much the deficit, and not that it was to supply it. The supposition of the citizen Croiset-Latouche is then gratuitous, and the error is in consequence upon his side, as he has taken wrong my opinion upon the actual deficit. This note remained without an answer. It was impossible to refute it, but the Directory thought itself sufficiently strong not to draw back. The last victories in Piedmont and Naples had increased their audacity. They addressed to us during the sitting a message where they rendered us responsible for our delay in completing the receipts. That document finished thus: "The government absolves itself in the eyes of the Republic from all responsibility for the disastrous consequences that an interruption of the most sacred and urgent circumstances will cause." This message, of which the reading followed the discourse of Croiset-Latouche, irritated us, as it was evidently made to force us to their will. It was not, however, without effect upon impartial and undecided minds. The partisans of the government endeavored to profit by that circumstance to close the discussion. Giraud Pouzol, who was much esteemed in the council, insisted upon their voting instantly. "It is precisely," said he, "because they heard yesterday a very luminous and eloquent opinion against the project, and today for the project an opinion equally eloquent and luminous, and I demand to close the discussion. I do not believe there is anything new to be heard upon that subject." I was, for my part, disposed to put it to the vote. Not having as yet experience in the assemblies, I do not imagine that the art of profiting by an incident often decides the victory. One of my colleagues, better informed than I was, warned me that if they voted at that moment, the tax would pass. I profited by his advice, and notwithstanding the compliment that Giraud Pouzol had addressed to me, I followed him to the tribune, where I combated him as follows: "I do not see why the discourses that have hitherto been pronounced appear sufficient, and why all the orators that are registered are not to be heard. Certainly they have not said that all that might have been said, which is proved by their refusing to hear what there remains to say, whatever arguments or imputations they may make upon the subject." whatever accusations of conspiration they may form, and from whatever authority those perfidious suggestions may proceed, I shall remain as insensible to personalities as the marble of this tribune. I shall listen only to the voice of my conscience, and I shall do only that which I think conformable to the interests of the people. Who shall dare to say that there has existed here an opposition tending to deprive the government of the means which are necessary for it? Was I not, with general consent, that the 200,000 conscripts were called to arms, and that the 125 millions destined for their maintenance was voted? They announced to us today a deficit. They demand fresh resources. Ought we not to discuss the necessity, the results, the advantages, and the inconveniences? Must our determination be carried away by an incident, by the influence out of the council? We should prove on the contrary to our constituents that we have decided only after having maturely weighed their interests. There is never a responsibility for the representatives of the people to discuss in liberty. I demand that the discussion may continue. The discussion continued. The effects of the directorial message, skillfully arranged, were neutralized in that city, but they had alarmed the timid. 2 days were again employed to combat and defend the unfortunate tax that the government desired to have at any price. It was in vain that they were offered several taxes equivalent and that were easier to collect. They repulsed all that was offered. After a very stormy sitting, the government gained by 46 voices after the adoption of the principle, which was so odious to us. We desired at least to diminish the evil. The tax was fixed at halfpenny in the pound. I desired that it should not be increased, and although discouraged, I again spoke upon the reduction of the first article and proposed the following amendment. I propose to declare that the tax of a halfpenny per pound upon salt can never be increased. The majority pronounced yesterday. It does not follow that we should again renew the combat, but it is necessary to shut the mouths of the malevolent and not to leave them in the pretext of accusing your intentions. I do not see why you repulse my amendment. Will they, in opposition to this, pretend that as the legislative body votes every year, the contributions, what I propose is useless and unconstitutional? But the project of law says, lower down, that the right cannot be confirmed if you thus anticipate the decision of your successors. You might as well decree that the tax should not be augmented. In making this proposition, I consider myself the organ of several of our colleagues whose opinions were quite contrary to the tax, and who have finished by consenting only in consequence of the lowness of the price of the tax. This declaration, which I beg of you not to refuse to make, will have the good effect of tranquilizing the contributaries. It will impose silence upon the malevolent, who are ever ready to seize upon occasions to do mischief and to empoison our intentions and to throw a discredit upon our discrees. They will not fail to say that you are contented today with a halfpenny, but that tomorrow you will exact 2 or 3. I insist upon the declaration which I propose as an amendment to your first article. My proposition was repulsed. The majority would not embellish their victory by moderation. Sad victory, which served only to make enemies for the Directory. For the Council of Ancients rejected the tax after a debate that was equally as sharp and as prolonged as ours, in which Corneille, Le Mercier, and Boudin decided the votes in our favor. The project of law was sent back to us. The Directory resigned itself by force, and our commissions of the finances occupied themselves with new endeavors necessary to make up the deficit.